We're going to start by measuring the height from our trim to our ceiling, or if you're removing your trim, your ceiling to your floor. You want to measure all the way across because depending on how square or well built your home was, this may vary slightly. So you might be able to cut these all the same, or you may have to cut at slight variances. Then I just went down to my garage and I cut a couple of these strips so I could start installing them. I hung them with drywall screws because I had some and they're black, so they hide pretty well. These are like felt with slats, so I just screwed through the felt and they stayed on just fine. This one, I've trimmed it to size, but we have an outlet back here. We're gonna have to take a measurement and trim out on here for this outlet. So you could, if you really cared, you could switch this to a black outlet and a black cover. I don't care. This is not gonna be in the sight of, this is like gonna be my backdrop for my podcast studio. So whatever, but if that mattered to you, like my husband has a navy blue accent wall and we actually replace the outlets in his office. So it depends what your design preference is. Me, I don't care. I measured where we would need to cut the hole for my outlet. It's the baby. And then I cut it out with my multi-tool. For now, for the sake of moving on, I'm just gonna get this whole accent wall up, but I'll show you in a future video how you can extend the gap from the back wall to the front if you need to use a spacer here to make this outlet look nice. I made an approximate mark where my lines were gonna go with tape so I wasn't writing all over the slats, and then I went ahead and measured exactly and cut out for my outlet. Now here's the sort of tricky part. We're gonna switch to a point where we have the angled ceiling, but it's not just an angle, it's straight and then it goes to the angle. So I have these cutoffs. So those are kind of handy because we could measure if we didn't have these. But so like, you know how I was telling you there's a bit of an overlap? See that little, so what happens is when you put this piece over that piece, the foam touches the felt in the back. So the nice thing is, instead of having to know what that exact overlap is, let me move this so you can see what I'm doing real quick. I can figure out exactly how far, like if I line this up, how it's gonna be lined up. I'm gonna go as high up as I can. And then I do a straight edge. It's not perfectly straight, I don't have a level here, but it gives me an idea. So I can go, I know approximately right here is how far it's gonna be flat, and then my angle is gonna start. Now I can find my angle finder and I can draw that line and I can angle off of that. So I have this line. If you had a laser level or a level even, you could get the plumbness of that. I'm just guessing, but I think we'll be close enough. I'm gonna take my angle finder. This is gonna be the top. And so I can line this up and I can say, okay, it's gonna go flush to here. So I did this wrong. I can just tell from looking at it, it's not right. So my line is here, but my angle needs to start at my line, not. So what I did is I lined up this end of my angle finder. So what I gotta do is it's gonna be the same angle, but that's where it's actually gotta start, because I want the angle to start right here. So it's actually, we're cutting off a little bit more than we anticipated, or than I wrote the first time. I was just wrong. But that's how you get stuff messed up, is because you do dumb stuff like that, which I did. Okay, so it's not gonna be this. This is all gonna get cut off. It's gonna be this one. Then we'll lift it up into place. Now I'm just gonna leave my saw at the same angle, and I'm gonna measure from the highest point to the end point, and that will be the longest point on the panel. I did my angle cut first at the top because I figured if I messed up, that was where I was more likely to. So I made that cut first, and then I chopped it to length after, and I double checked my measurement every time just to make sure I didn't overcut, because these are expensive, so I didn't have a lot of spare. I just have to show you guys, look at what a class act my cat is. Look at her. Look at this cat. Look at those paws. Just crossed, so polite. What a lovely gal. What a good girl. So again, now that we actually have a cutoff, we, instead of trying to measure, we can just do this and mark the spacing from that side and then trace it on there and cut it out so it'll be exact. For our last section, in my case, I still have the angle of the ceiling I have to measure, but also because things are not always perfectly plumb in building, I'm making sure that the gap is consistent enough that I don't need to cut this at a slight angle to fill all the way to the wall. Like a hecking glove. All right, last thing I want to point out is, see when you like stand back, how much those little screws stand out. So I'm going to move them all to the top and the bottom, just so we don't have like stuff like that.